I watched him destroy his chances in real time. He walked up to her with confidence. Good posture, nice smile. He had done everything the internet told him to do. And then he opened his mouth. Hey, what's your name? She told him. Cool. So what do you do? She answered. Nice. Where are you from? And just like that, I watched her eyes go somewhere else. Her body turned slightly away. She was still standing there, still responding, but she was already gone. He didn't see it. He kept asking, kept digging, kept trying to build something that was falling apart with every word. Here's what he didn't understand. Questions aren't conversation. Questions are confession. Every time you ask a woman something, you're telling her something about yourself. You're telling her you don't know what to say. You're telling her you need her to fill the silence. You're telling her that she's the prize and you're the contestant hoping to win. That's not attraction. That's an audition. Carl Jung once said that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed, but here's what most men miss. That transformation doesn't happen through interrogation. It happens through resonance. When you ask questions, you create distance. When you make observations, you create connection. Let me be clear about something right now. This isn't about manipulation. This isn't about tricking women or playing games. This is about understanding something deeper, something most men never learn. The person asking questions is always in the weaker position. Always. Think about it. Job interviews, police interrogations, first dates where you felt desperate. In every single one of these situations, the person asking the questions holds the power. No, wait, that's wrong. The person answering the questions decides the outcome. When you ask her questions, you hand her all the control. She decides what to reveal. She decides how to respond. She decides if you're worth her time. You become the applicant. She becomes the judge. Machiavelli understood this 500 years ago. He wrote in The Prince that men judge by the eye more than by the hand. They see what appears. They rarely touch what is real. When you ask questions, you appear uncertain. When you make statements, you appear knowing. Appearance is everything. Now, I know what you're thinking. How am I supposed to get to know her if I don't ask questions? That's the wrong question. The right question is this. Why do you think interrogation leads to knowing someone? Let me tell you what actually happens when you stop asking questions. You start paying attention. You start noticing things, the way she holds her drink, how her voice changes when she talks about certain topics. The small contradiction between what she says and what her body does. Most men are so busy preparing their next question that they never actually see the woman in front of them. They see an attractive female. They don't see her. Robert Greene wrote that the greatest mistake you can make is to think that people are simple. Every person is a universe, complex, contradictory, layered. When you ask surface questions, you get surface answers. When you observe deeply and speak to what you see, you enter different territory entirely. Here's what I'm going to teach you in this video. 7 principles for talking to women without asking questions. Not tricks, not manipulation. Principles that will change how you communicate with everyone, not just women you're attracted to. By the end, you'll understand something powerful. The quality of your questions reveals your position. The quality of your observations reveals your perception, and perception is what creates attraction. Nietzsche said that there are no facts, only interpretations. When you ask a woman facts about herself, you learn nothing meaningful. When you share your interpretation of what you observe, you demonstrate that you think, and thinking, real thinking, is rare enough to be attractive. Before we start, I need you to understand the difference between what I am teaching and what those alpha male gurus sell. They teach you to avoid questions because it makes you look weak. That's ego talking. I'm teaching you to replace questions with observations because it makes you more present. That's awareness talking. The goal isn't to seem powerful. The goal is to be engaged. Actually engaged. Not performing engagement while planning your next move. Truly seeing another person and responding to what you see. Jung believed that the meeting of two people is like mixing two chemicals. If there's a reaction, both transform, but there can be no reaction if you're not actually present. If you're just running through your list of interview questions, you're not there. You're in your head, and she can feel it. So here's the first principle, and if you only remember one thing from this video, remember this. Principle 1. Statements create presence. Questions create distance. When you make a statement, you offer something. A thought, an observation, a perspective. The other person can accept it, reject it, or build on it. But you gave them something to work with. When you ask a question, you demand something. Information, explanation, revelation. The other person has to produce something for you. One is generosity. The other is extraction. Think about the last conversation you had that felt truly alive, where both people were energized, engaged, ideas flowing back and forth. I guarantee it wasn't structured like an interview. It was built on statements, on shared observations, on one person saying something that sparked something in the other person. Now, think about the last conversation that felt like work. Someone asking you question after question, you answering, them asking more, you getting tired. That's what you create when you rely on questions. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that the happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts. The same applies to conversation. The quality of your interaction depends on the quality of what you offer, not what you extract. Here's how this looks in practice. Instead of asking, "Where are you from?" you say something like, "You're not from here originally." I can tell by the way you said that last thing. There's an accent hiding under your normal voice. See the difference? One demands information. The other shares an observation. She can confirm it, deny it, or ask what you noticed. But you've already demonstrated something. You were paying attention. You noticed details. You think about what you observe. That's attractive. Not because it's a power move, because it's rare. Let me give you more examples, because theory without practice is useless. Instead of, "What do you do for work?" try this. You have that look of someone who's bored by their own job description. I bet you're good at it, but it doesn't challenge you anymore. Instead of, "Do you come here often?" say this. This isn't your usual scene. You're observing everyone like you're studying something. Instead of, "What do you like to do for fun?" offer this. You seem like the type who has one weird hobby nobody would guess. Something completely different from how you present yourself. Notice what's happening in each of these. You're not demanding answers. You're sharing perceptions. And perceptions invite response in a completely different way than questions do. Sigmund Freud spent his entire career understanding that people reveal themselves not through what they say directly, but through slips, contradictions, and unconscious signals. When you make observations instead of asking questions, you're responding to those signals. You're reading between the lines. And when someone feels read, truly seen, something shifts. They become curious about you. Because most people go through life feeling invisible. Their performed self gets all the attention. Their real self stays hidden. The man who observes the real self, who speaks to it without demanding it come forward, becomes magnetic. Now here's principle 2. And this is where most men fail, even when they try to use statements. Principle 2. Observe the hidden, not the obvious. Listen carefully. If you replace questions with obvious statements, you've accomplished nothing. You have beautiful eyes. That dress looks amazing. You seem really confident. These are statements. Yes, they're also completely worthless. Why? Because they observe nothing. They confirm what any person with functioning vision could see. You haven't demonstrated perception. You've demonstrated the bare minimum of awareness. Arthur Schopenhauer wrote that talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see. The same applies to observation. Anyone can notice the obvious. The interesting person notices what's hidden. Let me show you the difference. She's at a bar, laughing with friends, seemingly having a great time. The obvious observation is you're having fun tonight. The hidden observation is you're performing right now. The laugh is real, but something else is on your mind. You're here, but you're not fully here. If you're right, she feels seen in a way that's uncomfortable and compelling. If you're wrong, she corrects you, but she's intrigued that you looked deeper than surface level. Either way, you've separated yourself from every other man who approached her that night. Jung talked extensively about the persona versus the shadow. The persona is the mask we show the world. The shadow is everything we hide. Most conversation happens entirely at the persona level, surface to surface, mask to mask. When you observe shadow elements, you enter different territory. You're acknowledging that depth exists, that she's more than her presentation, that you see complexity. Here are 3 categories of hidden observations that land consistently. Category 1, contradictions. She says she's spontaneous, but you notice she checks her phone at exact intervals. She claims not to care what people think, but she adjusted her posture when a certain group walked by. She presents as carefree, but her language is careful and calculated. Contradictions reveal the gap between who we want to be and who we are. Noticing them shows dangerous perception. You say something like, you talk about being spontaneous, but everything you do is pretty calculated. I'm not judging it, I'm just noticing it. Category 2. Effort patterns. Where is she trying? Where has she stopped trying? Her makeup is perfect, but her shoes are practical. She's dressed to impress from the waist up, but comfortable from the waist down. She's here for attention, but not for action. You might say, you put a lot of effort into how people see you from a distance. But up close, you're actually pretty low maintenance. That's an interesting choice. Category 3, protection mechanisms. What is she guarding? Quick subject changes around certain topics. Defensive body language when specific things come up. Excessive emphasis on things she claims not to care about. You observe this by saying something like, there's something you don't talk about. I can see it in how quickly you move past certain topics. You don't have to tell me what it is. I'm just acknowledging that it exists. Now, here's the critical part. These observations must be delivered without judgment, not as accusations, not as attempts to expose her, as simple recognition. Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, but most people can't do that because they're so busy maintaining the performance. When you acknowledge the performance without attacking it, you give permission for authenticity. That permission is what creates real connection. Nietzsche wrote that we have art in order not to die of the truth. Everyone is performing. Everyone is hiding something. The question is whether you're going to pretend you don't notice or acknowledge it with grace. Principle 3. Tonality carries more weight than words. Everything I've taught you so far fails completely if delivered with the wrong energy. The most insightful observation becomes creepy if said with desperate intensity. The most powerful statement becomes try hard if delivered with visible need for validation. This is where most men destroy themselves. They learn what to say. They never learn how to say it. Machiavelli understood that presentation matters more than content. He wrote that everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. Your tonality reveals what you really are. There are 3 vocal registers that make statements land. Register 1, calm certainty, not loud, not aggressive, the quiet confidence of someone who doesn't need agreement but knows they're right anyway. When you observe something about her, it's stated as fact, not as question-seeking validation. You're not as happy as you're pretending to be right now. That statement lands completely differently depending on whether it's said with calm observation or anxious speculation. Register 2, warm detachment. You care enough to notice, you don't care enough to need a particular response. This paradox creates tension because she can't figure out if she has your attention or not. Your warmth invites, your detachment challenges. Together they create magnetic uncertainty. Think about the people who've captivated you most in life. They weren't the ones who desperately needed your approval. They were the ones who seemed genuinely interested, but perfectly fine if you walked away. That combination is intoxicating. Register 3, controlled depth. When you speak to something meaningful, your voice should lower slightly, slow down slightly. Create the sense that you're sharing something significant, not performing something clever. Depth requires vocal weight. If you deliver a profound observation at the same speed and pitch as small talk, it lands as small talk. The delivery tells the listener how to receive the content. Robert Greene wrote about seductive rhythm. Master communicators don't just choose words, they choose tempo. They know when to speed up, creating energy, when to slow down, creating weight, when to pause, creating anticipation. Most men speak at one speed, one tone, one intensity throughout the entire conversation. Monotony kills engagement faster than saying the wrong thing. Here's the practice. Record yourself speaking for 2 minutes about anything. Listen back. Notice where your voice becomes predictable, where you speed up from nervousness, where your tone flattens, then deliberately practiced variation. It feels unnatural at first. Eventually, it becomes your natural range. And that range is what makes people want to keep listening. Epictetus taught that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we may listen more and talk less. But I'll add this, when you do talk, make it worth hearing. And worth hearing isn't just about content, it's about delivery. Now we arrive at principle 4, and this one makes most men deeply uncomfortable. Principle 4: silence is not empty space. It's active presence. Men fear silence in conversation because it feels like failure. The conversation is dying. Interest is fading. They must save it with words. This panic destroys more attraction than any other single instinct. Silence after a statement amplifies its power. You make an observation. She responds. Instead of immediately filling the space with more words, you let her response breathe. You hold eye contact. You allow the moment to exist. That silence communicates multiple things simultaneously. I don't need to perform for you. I'm comfortable with tension. I trust what I just said enough to let it stand. I'm not desperately managing your reaction. Nietzsche believed that the most profound things are found in silence, not speech. He wrote that one must have chaos within to give birth to a dancing star. Silence is that chaos. It's the unknown, the unpredictable, the space where real things happen. When you embrace silence instead of fearing it, something changes in how you're perceived. You become mysterious, not because you're withholding information, but because you're comfortable with not filling every second with noise. There are 2 types of strategic silence. Type 1, reflective silence. This comes after she says something meaningful. Instead of immediately responding, you pause as if genuinely considering her words. This communicates that what she said matters enough to think about. Most men respond instantly. This signals they weren't really listening. They were just waiting for their turn to speak. Reflective silence shows actual processing is happening. Type 2, charged silence. This comes after you say something meaningful. You make an observation about her. You watch her reaction. You don't explain, don't justify, don't soften. You let it land. This silence forces her to process without your help. It demonstrates that you don't need to manage her response. You said what you observed. Now she gets to decide what to do with it. Marcus Aurelius practiced what he called the discipline of assent, the conscious choice not to immediately react to every stimulus in conversation. This means building the muscle of pause. When you feel the urge to fill silence, notice that urge. Don't act on it. Let the discomfort exist for 3 seconds longer than feels comfortable. Then decide if words are actually needed. Here's what happens when you master strategic silence. Conversations become shorter but more impactful. You say less, but what you say lands harder. She remembers your words because they weren't diluted by nervous chatter. And she perceives you as centered, self-possessed, someone who doesn't need constant validation through verbal exchange. Plato believed that wise men speak because they have something to say. Fools speak because they have to say something. Silence is how you prove which category you belong to. Principle 5. Create investment through incomplete loops. The human brain cannot tolerate unfinished patterns. When a story starts but doesn't end, when a statement implies more than it says, when an observation opens a door but doesn't walk through it, the mind becomes obsessed with completion. This is called the Zeigarnik effect. Incomplete tasks are remembered far better than completed ones. In conversation, This means the person who leaves things unsaid creates more mental real estate than the person who explains everything fully. When you observe something about her shadow, you don't explain it entirely. You open the door and stop. There's something you're protecting. I won't ask what it is. That incomplete loop stays with her after the conversation ends. She wonders how you knew. She wonders what you saw. She wonders what would happen if she told you. When you share something about yourself, you don't complete the story. I learned something at 22 that changed how I see people entirely. But that's probably a story for another time. Now she needs to see you again to hear the ending. The loop demands closure. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must always maintain some uncertainty. Certainty breeds contempt. Uncertainty breeds attention in conversation. Full disclosure kills interest. Strategic incompleteness sustains it. Here's how to implement this practically for every significant exchange. Ask yourself internally, am I completing this loop or leaving it open? Most men instinctively complete everything. They answer questions fully. They explain statements exhaustively. They provide closure constantly. This is why they're forgettable. The man who masters incomplete loops becomes unforgettable because he's never fully resolved. Every conversation ends with threads still dangling. Every interaction leaves something undiscovered. Jung knew that the psyche is drawn to what remains mysterious. Freud knew that the unconscious seeks what it cannot fully grasp. The person who creates that pull while remaining worthy of pursuit becomes magnetic. But here's the warning. Incomplete loops only work if there's substance behind them. If you're mysterious about nothing, you're just vague. Mystery requires actual depth. You can't leave loops incomplete if there's nothing to complete. This isn't about pretending to be interesting. It's about actually being someone with experiences, thoughts, and observations worth discovering. Carl Jung said that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. Most men use questions as that avoidance. They interrogate others to escape examining themselves. When you stop asking questions, you're forced to offer something instead. Your observations, your interpretations, your perspective. And that requires actually having a perspective. This brings us to Principle 6. And this one separates men who understand human nature from men who are just trying to get laid. Principle 6, speak to potential, not achievement. Here's something most men completely miss. Women are constantly evaluated on what they've already done, how they look, what they've accomplished, their status, their presentation. Everyone speaks to the resume. Almost no one speaks to the person who exists beyond it. When you observe a woman, don't comment on her achievements. Comment on her trajectory, not where she is, where she's going, not what she's done, what she's capable of. She tells you she works in corporate finance. Most men say, that's impressive, or ask boring questions about her job. You say, you're too curious for that world. I bet you have an exit plan you haven't told anyone about yet. She mentions she's been at her job for 5 years. Others congratulate her on stability. You observe 5 years is exactly when people start feeling trapped. You're probably deciding right now whether to commit or burn it down and start over. See the difference. You're not speaking to her current state. You're speaking to her internal process, her becoming. Jordan Peterson talks constantly about potential versus achievement. He says we're most alive when we're moving towards something, not when we've arrived. When you speak to someone's potential, their movement, their becoming, you're speaking to the part of them that's most alive. This creates an electric response because most people don't feel seen in their potential. They feel judged on their current state. You're offering something different, recognition of who they're becoming. Nietzsche wrote that man is something to be overcome. He meant we're always in transition, always becoming. The person who sees that process and speaks to it directly connects at a level surface conversation never reaches. But here's the technique. You don't speak to potential as flattery. You speak to it as observation, not you could be anything you want. That's meaningless encouragement. Instead, you're outgrowing something right now. I can see it in how you talk about your life. You're not unhappy exactly. You're just finished with this version of yourself. That observation, if accurate, will hit like lightning. Because it's true. And truth, when delivered without agenda, creates instant connection. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that each person has a will, a driving force that moves them forward. Most conversation ignores this will entirely. When you observe it, name it, speak directly to it, you're engaging with the core of who someone is. Now, Principle 7, the final piece that makes everything work. Principle 7. Observations without agenda land differently than observations with need. Here's the hard truth. Everything I've taught you fails completely if you do it because you want something from her. If your observations are tactics designed to create attraction, she'll feel it and it will repel her. The paradox is this. These principles work extraordinarily well, but only when you genuinely don't need them to work. Carl Jung said that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But there can be no reaction if one substance is trying to force a specific outcome. When you make observations, because you're genuinely curious, because you actually find human behavior fascinating, because you can't help but notice things, those observations create connection. When you make observations because you're trying to seem perceptive, trying to establish dominance, trying to make her attracted to you, those same observations create distance. The difference is felt, not spoken. She can sense agenda. Everyone can. We've evolved to detect when someone wants something from us versus when someone is simply engaging authentically. Robert Greene wrote that the best seducers don't seduce. They create conditions where the other person seduces themselves. You can't create those conditions with agenda. You can only create them with genuine presence. So here's what I want you to understand as we close. Stop asking questions isn't the point. The point is become someone who has observations worth sharing. Become someone who pays attention, who thinks about what they see, who develops perspectives on human nature, psychology, behavior, motivation. Questions are shortcuts. They let you seem interested without being interesting. When you remove that shortcut, you're forced to offer substance instead. And substance is what creates lasting attraction. Not tactics, not techniques, actual depth. Machiavelli wrote that the wise man does at once what the fool does finally. The fool eventually learns that presence matters more than performance. The wise man knows this from the start. Let me show you what this looks like when it all comes together. You approach a woman at an event. You don't open with a question. You make an observation about something specific, not, you look beautiful, that's lazy. Instead, you chose the corner seat. most people want to be in the center. You either tired of being perceived or you're restudying everyone before deciding who is worth talking to. She laughs, maybe admits it, maybe denies it. Doesn't matter. You've demonstrated immediate perception. She responds with something about herself. You don't follow up with a question. You make another observation based on what she said. You describe that job like you're trying to convince yourself you chose it. Past tense, chose, like the choosing is over and now you're just living with the decision. Your tonality stays warm but detached. Interested but not invested. You're present but you're not performing. When she says something meaningful, you let silence hang for 3 seconds before responding. You're not rushing. You're not managing her reaction. You're just there. If she asks you a question, you answer briefly, then shift back to observation. She asks what you do. You say something like, I do work that pays bills. But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is watching how everyone defines themselves by their job title. Like, we're all just our LinkedIn profiles walking around pretending that's who we are. Now you've answered, but you've also created a frame. You're the person who thinks about these things, who observes patterns, who questions social script. Throughout the conversation, you leave loops open. You mention something from your past but don't explain it fully. You observe something about her but don't demand she confirm it. You create space for curiosity to grow. And most importantly, you do all of this without needing it to lead anywhere. You're engaged because the conversation itself is interesting, not because you're hoping for a specific outcome. That lack of agenda is what makes everything land. Epictetus taught that we should concern ourselves only with what we can control. You cannot control whether she's attracted to you. You can only control the quality of your presence when you focus entirely on being present, on observing genuinely, on sharing authentic perspectives. Attraction becomes a byproduct instead of a goal. Now, let me address what you're probably thinking. This sounds hard. It sounds like it requires completely changing how I communicate.
Yes, it does.
But here's what nobody tells you. The old way, the question-based approach, wasn't working anyway. It was just familiar. Comfortable in its predictability, but comfort and effectiveness are not the same thing. Jung said that there is no coming to consciousness without pain. Learning to communicate this way is uncomfortable. You'll feel exposed sharing observations instead of hiding behind questions. You'll feel vulnerable holding silence instead of filling it with noise. That discomfort is the price of growth. But here's what happens on the other side. Conversations become genuinely interesting. Not just tactics you're deploying, actually engaging exchanges where you're learning, observing, connecting. You stop feeling like you're performing and start feeling like you're participating. And that shift changes everything. Because here's the secret. Women can tell when you're performing versus when you're present. Always. The performance might work for 5 minutes. Presence works for a lifetime. Arthur Schopenhauer wrote that we forfeit 3/4 of ourselves to be like other people. Most men forfeit their genuine observations, their real thoughts, their authentic presence to ask the same boring questions everyone else asks. They think it's safer. It's not safer. It's just more common. And common is invisible when you speak from genuine observation, when you share real perspectives, when you engage authentically, you become visible, memorable, different from every other man she's talked to this week. That's not manipulation. That's simply being yourself instead of being a copy of everyone else. Let me give you the practice plan for the next 7 days. Challenge yourself to this. In every conversation with a woman, make 0 direct questions. Not one. Only statements and observations. You'll panic at first. You'll feel like you have nothing to say.
Good at it.
Panic reveals how dependent you've been on questions as crutches. Push through it. Make observations about what you notice. Share perspectives on what you see. Speak to potential instead of achievement. Leave some loops incomplete. By day 3, you'll notice something. Conversations feel different, more alive, less like interviews, more like actual exchanges. By day 7, you'll notice something else. You're paying attention in ways you never did before because you can't make observations if you're not observing. And that heightened awareness changes how you move through the world entirely. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. The difficulty of speaking without questions forces you to develop actual presence, and presence is what you were seeking all along. Now here's the deeper truth beneath all of this. The reason most men ask so many questions is because they don't trust their own perceptions. They don't believe their observations are valuable. They don't think their perspectives matter. So they ask, they extract, they try to find value in what she reveals instead of offering value through what they observe. When you shift to statements, you're making a declaration. My observations have worth. My perspectives matter. I have something to offer beyond being a good listener. That declaration, lived through your communication, changes how you're perceived. But more importantly, it changes how you perceive yourself. Carl Jung said that your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. Questions keep you looking outside, looking to her for validation, for information, for confirmation that you're doing this right. Observations force you to look inside, to trust what you see, to believe your perceptions have value, to wake up to your own awareness. That awakening is what creates genuine confidence, not the performed kind, the real kind, the kind that doesn't need constant external validation because it's rooted in internal knowing. And that confidence, that groundedness, that self-trust is more attractive than any technique could ever be. So yes, stop asking so many questions, but understand why. Not because questions make you look weak, because questions keep you dependent on external validation. Statements, observations, shared perspectives. These force you to stand in your own awareness, to trust what you see, to offer value instead of extracting it. And when you offer value from a place of genuine presence, attraction stops being something you chase. It becomes something that naturally emerges. Nietzsche said to become who you are. Most men never become who they are because they're too busy trying to figure out who she wants them to be. The questions, are you asking them to understand her or to figure out what version of yourself to perform? When you speak from observation, instead, you're being yourself, offering your genuine perceptions, sharing your real thoughts, and yourself, your actual self, is more attractive than any performed version could ever be. Final thought. Machiavelli wrote that men are so simple and so ready to obey present necessities that one who deceives will always find those who allow themselves to be deceived. I'm not teaching you to deceive. I'm teaching you to stop deceiving yourself. Stop pretending that interview questions create connection. Stop performing interest you don't feel. Stop asking questions to fill silence you're afraid of. Instead, be present, observe genuinely, speak authentically, trust your perceptions, leave some mystery, not as tactics, as truth, because the truth is this: the most attractive version of you is the one that's fully present, fully aware, fully themselves. Questions keep you fragmented. Observations make you whole. And wholeness, true presence, genuine self-possession, that's what creates the kind of attraction that lasts beyond the first conversation. Stop asking questions. Start being present. The rest takes care of itself.